Jungkook buys a small house without telling anyone. When Jimin walks in and sees one room bearing his name, his tears fall. Jimin discovers a hidden room with his name in Jungkook's secret house, unraveling love, fear, and memories neither of them dared to face. The door slammed open against the wall with a crack that echoed through the narrow hallway, and Jimin froze when he saw his own name carved into the wood at the end of it. Dust floated in the late afternoon light, turning the air into a haze of gold. The small house smelled of fresh paint, pine wood, and something older, like rain trapped in old floorboards. Jimin's chest tightened as he stepped inside, his shoes creaking against the unfinished planks. He hadn't known why Jungkook had insisted on bringing him here, why the younger man had stood outside for a full minute before unlocking the door with trembling hands. "Wait here," Jungkook had said earlier, voice too casual, too thin. But Jimin never listened when his heart sensed danger. Now he stood in the hallway alone, staring at the carved letters, Park Jimin. The grooves were uneven, clearly done by hand, not machine, each stroke hesitant, as if the carver had been afraid of making a mistake that could never be undone. His throat burned. "Jungkook, what is this?" No answer came, only the distant hum of cicadas outside and the faint ticking of a clock somewhere deeper in the house. He pushed the door open. The room was small, but sunlight poured through a wide window dressed in sheer curtains that fluttered like breath. A low bookshelf lined one wall, filled not with trophies or awards, but with worn paperbacks, novels Jimin had once mentioned loving and assumed Jungkook had forgotten. A soft rug covered the floor, the same shade of pale grey Jimin had absent-mindedly pointed out in a store months ago. In the corner sat a single armchair with a knitted blanket draped over it, uneven stitches betraying an amateur hand. Jimin reached out and touched the blanket. The yarn was soft, slightly rough in places where the tension had slipped. He knew instantly who had made it. His vision blurred. Behind him, the floor creaked. "I thought you'd hate it." Jungkook's voice was barely above a whisper, yet it carried the weight of a confession years in the making. Jimin turned slowly. Jungkook stood in the doorway, shoulders hunched, fingers curled into the sleeves of his oversized sweater, a habit he'd never broken when he felt small. "Hate it," Jimin repeated, his voice breaking. You built this." Jungkook shook his head. "Not built, bought, fixed, failed, tried again." A humorless smile flickered across his lips. "I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want them to ask why." The silence between them was thick, with everything unsaid. Jimin remembered the long nights when Jungkook had stopped answering messages, the vague excuses, the exhaustion he couldn't hide. Jimin had assumed it was work, pressure, expectations. He hadn't imagined this, a secret carved into wood and painted into walls. "Why my name?" Jimin asked, though his heart already knew. Jungkook looked past him into the room, as if afraid to meet his eyes. "Because you're the only place that's ever felt like home." The words landed softly, but they shattered something inside Jimin. He sank into the armchair without meaning to, hands gripping the blanket as tears spilled freely down his cheeks. He wasn't someone who cried easily, not in front of others, not even in front of himself. But this room was filled with fragments of him he hadn't realized Jungkook had been collecting. His favorite colors, his comfort books, the way he liked sunlight instead of harsh overhead lights, the quiet he pretended not to need. "You disappeared," Jimin whispered. "You shut me out." "I was afraid," Jungkook admitted. "If I told you, if I made it real, you might realize you never wanted this, that I was building something only I believed in." Jimin laughed through his tears, a broken, breathless sound. "You idiot, you built a whole house instead of asking me one question." Jungkook's lips trembled. "I've never been brave when it comes to you." The confession hung in the warm air. Outside, the wind stirred the trees, their shadows dancing across the walls like fleeting memories. Jimin studied Jungkook's face, the sleepless shadows under his eyes, the small scar on his chin from a fall years ago, the vulnerability he showed to no one else. Layered beneath his love was fear, fear of abandonment, of being second choice, of repeating the loneliness that had defined his childhood. Jungkook carried his past like a second spine, rigid, unyielding, always threatening to snap. Jimin stood and crossed the room. Each step felt deliberate, like walking toward a truth he could no longer avoid. He stopped inches away, close enough to hear Jungkook's uneven breathing. "You should have told me," Jimin said softly. "I know. You should have let me help. I know." Jimin reached out and took Jungkook's sleeve, tugging it down so their hands could meet. Jungkook's fingers were cold, calloused from weeks of sanding wood and turning screws. Jimin threaded their fingers together, grounding them both. "This is just your house," Jimin said. "If my name is on that door, then it's ours, and you don't get to decide that alone." Jungkook's composure finally cracked. A tear slipped down his cheek, and he let out a shaky breath that sounded like relief and grief tangled together. "You're not angry." "I'm furious," Jimin said, squeezing his hand. "But not because you built this, because you thought you had to do it alone." The late sunlight shifted, bathing the room in amber. Dust motes drifted like tiny constellations, and for the first time since entering the house, Jimin felt the tightness in his chest ease. The room wasn't a monument to unspoken love. It was an invitation, clumsy and imperfect, but sincere. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, embarrassed by the dampness. "You even got the rug color right," he murmured. Jungkook huffed a soft laugh. "You pointed at it for 10 minutes. "I did not." "You did. The store clerk thought we were redecorating a palace." Jimin smiled, the expression fragile but real. He looked around once more, the books, the blanket, the window, and imagined mornings filled with quiet coffee, evenings with rain tapping against the glass, arguments over trivial things that only people who stayed could afford to have. "Next time," Jimin said, turning back to him, "we choose things together." Jungkook nodded, eyes shining. "Next time." Outside, the cicadas' song swelled, and the small house, once a secret, felt less like a hiding place and more like the beginning of something neither of them had dared to name aloud. The rain began without warning, drumming against the roof in a sudden, violent rhythm that made the small house feel even smaller. Jimin stood by the window of the room that bore his name, watching the glass blur under sheets of water. The late sunlight from earlier had vanished, replaced by a bruised sky and the distant growl of thunder. Behind him, Jungkook paced the hallway like a caged storm, his footsteps uneven, his breathing loud enough to compete with the rain. "You can't just decide this for both of us," Jungkook said, voice tight. "You walked in and claimed it like it was always yours." Jimin turned slowly. "You carved my name into the door." "That was before you saw it," Jungkook snapped. "Before it became real, before you could reject it." The words hung between them, sharp and reckless. Jimin's jaw tightened. "You think I'd reject you?" "I think you've left before," Jungkook shot back. "Every time things got too heavy, you smiled, you joked, you changed the subject. You disappear in plain sight, Jimin, and I'm the idiot who keeps pretending that's enough." The accusation landed deeper than Jungkook probably intended. Jimin felt it in the hollow beneath his ribs, the place where old guilt lived. "You think I don't stay?" Jimin asked quietly. "You think standing beside you while you drown in expectations isn't staying?" Jungkook laughed bitterly. "Standing beside me isn't the same as standing with me." Thunder cracked overhead, shaking the windowpanes. The lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The house, once a secret sanctuary, now felt like a pressure chamber. Jimin stepped into the hallway. "You built this because you were afraid I'd leave, and now you're pushing me out before I can even choose." "I'm not pushing you out," Jungkook said, though his voice wavered. "I'm bracing myself." "For what?" "For the moment you realize I'm too much." The confession was raw, stripped of pride. Jungkook's shoulders sagged as if the words themselves had weight. Jimin stared at him, anger dissolving into something more fragile. "You don't get to decide what I can handle," he said. "You don't get to script my leaving just so it hurts less when it happens." Jungkook's hands curled into fists. You don't understand what it's like to be left behind before the door even closes. Then tell me, Jimin demanded. Stop building walls and tell me. The rain intensified, pounding the roof like a relentless heartbeat. Jungkook dragged a hand through his damp hair, packing once more before stopping in front of Jimin. My parents fought in whispers, he began, voice hoarse. No shouting, no breaking plates, just silence that stretched for days. One morning my mother was gone, no note, no goodbye, just an empty closet and a father who pretended nothing had changed. Jimin's breath caught. I learned early, Jungkook continued, that people don't leave loudly, they leave in the quiet, in the spaces you think are safe. The hallway felt colder. So I build things, Jungkook said, gesturing around them. Rooms, plans, futures. If I can see it, touch it, maybe it won't disappear. Jimin's chest ached, and you thought I would. I thought you might, Jungkook whispered, because you deserve something lighter than me. The words ignited something fierce in Jimin. Stop deciding what I deserve, he said, voice rising. You think I'm here because it's easy, because loving you fits neatly into a schedule. You are chaos, Jungkook. You are late-night panic and stubborn silence, and that infuriating habit of taking everything on your own shoulders. Jungkook blinked, stunned. And I'm still here, Jimin continued, his voice trembling with emotion. Not because I have nowhere else to go, because I choose you, every exhausting, beautiful, terrifying part of you. The rain softened, as if the storm itself were listening. Jungkook's lips parted, but no words came. His eyes searched Jimin's face, as though trying to memorize the truth there. Why didn't you tell me about the house? Jimin asked more gently. Jungkook swallowed. Because if you said no, I'd have to accept that the home I imagined was never real. Jimin stepped closer until only inches separated them. Homes aren't real because you build them alone, he said. They're real because someone stays. A long silence followed, filled only by the steady patter of rain and the distant rumble of retreating thunder. Then Jungkook asked the question he had been avoiding since the moment he bought the house. Will you stay? Jimin didn't answer immediately. He looked past Jungkook, down the narrow hallway, at the front door still slightly ajar from when they'd rushed inside. Cold air slipped through the gap, carrying the scent of wet earth and storm-soaked leaves. He thought of all the times he had chosen silence instead of vulnerability, all the moments he had laughed away his fears rather than speak them. Staying, he realized, wasn't a single decision, it was 1,000 small ones made daily, imperfectly. He met Jungkook's gaze. I will, he said, but not as a guest in a house you built for me, as someone who helps build what comes next. Jungkook's breath hitched. Relief and disbelief warred in his expression, leaving him visibly shaken. He reached out, hesitant, as if afraid Jimin might vanish if he moved too quickly. Their hands met again, this time not cold, not tentative, but steady. A sudden knock shattered the fragile calm. Both of them froze. Another knock followed, louder, insistent. Not the polite tap of a neighbor, but the heavy, deliberate pounding of someone who expected the door to open. Jungkook frowned. No one knows about this place. The pounding came again, rattling the frame. Jimin's pulse quickened. Did you tell anyone, even by accident? Jungkook shook his head slowly. No. The doorknob rattled. Rainwater seeped under the threshold, pooling on the floorboards like an omen. Jimin's grip on Jungkook's hand tightened. Then who? The door burst open. The door slammed against the wall so hard the glass in the hallway frames rattled, and a gust of rain-laced wind tore through the house like it had been waiting outside for years. A figure stood in the doorway, backlit by the storm. Water streamed from dark hair, dripping onto the wooden floor Jungkook had sanded with his own hands. For a split second, neither Jungkook nor Jimin moved, their joined hands frozen between them. Then the figure stepped forward. Miss me? Taehyung's voice cut through the air, low and edged, with something dangerously close to a smile. Jungkook's fingers went slack in Jimin's grip. What are you doing here? Taehyung shrugged out of his soaked coat, tossing it onto the floor as if he owned the place. Nice house, small, secretive, dramatic, very you. Jimin's stomach tightened. He hadn't seen Taehyung in months, not since the fight that had fractured their circle into polite silences and unreturned calls. Seeing him here, in this hidden place, felt like a violation. You can't just barge in, Jimin said, voice sharp. How did you even find this place? Taehyung's eyes flicked to the carved door at the end of the hall, then back to Jimin's tear-streaked face and Jungkook's pale expression. Something unreadable passed across his features. You really didn't tell him? Taehyung asked Jungkook quietly. The question landed like a match in dry grass. Jimin turned to Jungkook. Tell me what? Jungkook looked suddenly younger, cornered. It's not. Taehyung laughed, the sound hollow. God, you're still doing that. Building fantasies and hopping reality won't knock. Stop, Jungkook warned, his voice trembling. But Taehyung stepped further inside, rainwater marking each step like a trail of evidence. He deserves to know why this house exists, why you disappeared, why you cut everyone off. Jimin's pulse roared in his ears. Jungkook. Jungkook shook his head, backing away as if the walls themselves were closing in. Not like this. Like what? Taehyung shot back. You want a candlelit confession, a soft soundtrack. You dragged him into this without the truth. Jimin's chest tightened. Truth about what? The storm outside surged again, thunder rolling low and long. Taehyung's gaze didn't leave Jungkook. You bought this house, Taehyung said slowly, the week you signed the contract to leave. Silence. Jimin blinked. Leave. Jungkook's face drained of color. Tell him, Taehyung pressed, or I will. Don't, Jungkook whispered. But Jimin stepped forward, voice shaking with something dangerously close to betrayal. Leave where? Taehyung's answer came like a blade. New York, 6 months, maybe longer, international project. He signed before he even told us he was considering it. The words echoed through the hallway, each one heavier than the last. Jimin stared at Jungkook. You were going to leave, and you built this, what, a memorial. It wasn't like that, Jungkook said, panic bleeding into his voice. I didn't know how to tell you. I thought if I made something that stayed. So you planned to disappear, Jimin cut in, his voice rising. You were afraid I'd leave, so you decided to go first. That's not fair, Jungkook said, but his eyes gave him away. Taehyung folded his arms, watching them like someone witnessing a slow-motion collapse. He thought it would hurt less if he left you with a place to remember him. Jimin let out a disbelieving laugh, the sound sharp and wet. A place to remember you? I'm not a widow, Jungkook. I'm not someone you abandon with furniture and sunlight. Jungkook flinched. I was going to come back, Jungkook said desperately. It was temporary. You didn't tell me, Jimin said. You made a future without asking if I wanted to be part of it. The accusation hit harder than any shout. I was afraid you'd ask me to stay, Jungkook admitted, voice breaking. And I didn't know if I was strong enough to choose you over everything I've worked for. The honesty was brutal. Jimin's hands shook, so I was a choice, a difficult one. You were the only one that mattered, Jungkook said. That's why it was impossible. Taehyung scoffed softly. You call this love? It looks more like fear dressed up as sacrifice. Stay out of this, Jungkook snapped. I tried, Taehyung replied. You shut me out too, remember. You cut off everyone who might tell you that running isn't bravery. Jimin's head spun. The house, once warm, now felt suffocating, every wall a reminder of decisions made in silence. You were going to leave, Jimin repeated, quieter now, without trusting me with the truth. Jungkook stepped closer, eyes pleading. I didn't want you to see me choose something else over you. But you did choose, Jimin said. You just didn't let me see it. The rain began to ease, but inside the house, the storm had only deepened. Taehyung's voice softened, losing its earlier bite. He's been miserable, he said, working himself to the bone, sleeping in studios, pretending the distance would make the decision easier. Jungkook closed his eyes. I didn't ask for your help. You didn't ask for anyone's, Taehyung replied. That's the problem. Jimin looked between them, realization dawning. You came here to stop him. Taehyung hesitated. I came here because he sent me the address 2 nights ago. No message, just a pin on a map. He met Jungkook's gaze. You don't send someone a location at 3 a.m. unless you're asking to be found. Jungkook's silence confirmed it. Jimin's anger faltered, replaced by something more complicated. Hurt tangled with understanding, betrayal threaded through with love. You wanted someone to stop you, Jimin said. Jungkook's voice was barely audible. I wanted someone to tell me I didn't have to do everything alone. The admission cracked the tension wide open. Taehyung exhaled slowly, some of his earlier hostility melting into weary concern. You're an idiot, he muttered, both of you. Jimin let out a shaky breath. That's not helpful. It's accurate, Taehyung said. You love each other like it's a secret you're both afraid to confirm. The words hung in the air, undeniable. Jimin looked at Jungkook, the fear, the hope, the exhaustion etched into his features. When were you going to tell me? He asked. Jungkook swallowed. Tomorrow. Tomorrow, Jimin repeated, incredulous. I wanted one day, Jungkook said. One day where this house could exist without the weight of goodbye. Jimin's eyes burned again. You don't get to have a goodbye without giving me a choice. I know, Jungkook whispered. Taehyung shifted uncomfortably, suddenly looking like he regretted being there. I should go, he said. This isn't my fight. No, Jimin said, surprising himself. Stay, you kicked the door down, you're part of this now. Taehyung raised an eyebrow. You sure? No, Jimin admitted, but nothing about tonight is certain. The three of them stood in the narrow hallway, the storm fading outside, leaving behind the quiet drip of water from Taehyung's coat and the soft ticking of the unseen clock. Jimin looked once more at the door with his name carved into it, then back at Jungkook. Are you still going? He asked. Jungkook's answer came after a long, trembling pause. I don't know. The clock on the wall finally revealed itself with a sharp, deliberate tick, as if time had grown impatient with their silence. No one moved. Rainwater continued to drip from Taehyung's coat, forming a widening dark stain on Jungkook's carefully sanded floor. The house smelled of damp fabric, pine, and the faint metallic tang of tension that clung to the back of Jimin's throat. I don't know, Jungkook had said. The words still hovered in the air, unfinished, unacceptable. Jimin let out a slow breath that trembled despite his effort to steady it. You don't know, he repeated, softer but more dangerous. You signed a contract. You packed your life into silence. You built me a room like an apology carved in wood, and now you don't know. Jungkook's hands shook at his sides. I thought I did. Taehyung leaned against the wall, arms folded, watching them with an expression that wavered between concern and exhaustion. He thought distance would make things clearer, he said. It never does. Jungkook shot him a look. Stop narrating my life. Then say something honest, Taehyung replied. Because right now you sound like a man trying to keep every door open so he doesn't have to admit which one he's walking through. The accusation hit its mark. Jungkook turned away, dragging a hand over his face. Jimin's voice dropped to a whisper. Were you going to tell me before you left for the airport or after? Jungkook flinched. That late, Jimin asked, the hurt breaking through. You were going to let me wake up to a message, weren't you? I was afraid if I saw your face, I wouldn't go, Jungkook admitted. Silence followed, heavy and suffocating. Taehyung muttered under his breath, coward. Jungkook's head snapped up. You think this is easy? You think choosing between everything I've worked for and the only person who's ever made me want to stay is simple? No, Taehyung said evenly. I think you're pretending it's a choice between success and love, when it's really a choice between fear and honesty. Jimin's chest tightened. He could feel the truth in that, sharp and undeniable. "You never asked me what I wanted," Jimin said, his voice unsteady. "You decided for both of us, again." Jungkook's eyes glistened. "What if you asked me to stay and I resented you for it?" "Then we would face that together," Jimin said. "That's what people do when they don't want to lose each other." The words seemed to shake something loose inside Jungkook. He sank onto the edge of a narrow bench in the hallway, elbows on his knees, head bowed. The house, once his secret project, now felt like a witness to his worst fears laid bare. "I don't know how to be half of something," he said quietly. "I've only ever survived by carrying everything myself." Jimin knelt in front of him, forcing Jungkook to look up. "You're not surviving anymore," he said. "You're living, and living means letting someone see you fail, doubt, and choose wrong sometimes." Taehyung looked away, jaw tight, as if the intimacy of the moment was something he wasn't meant to see. Jungkook's voice broke. "What if I lose you anyway?" Jimin's answer came without hesitation. "Then at least we lost each other honestly, not because you ran before I could stay." The house creaked as the wind shifted outside, a low groan that sounded almost like agreement. Taehyung pushed himself off the wall. "You know," he said, quieter now, "I was angry when you sent me the address. I thought you were showing off. A secret house, a grand gesture. I didn't realize it was a bunker." Jungkook gave a hollow laugh. "It was supposed to be a beginning." "It still can be," Taehyung said, "if you stop treating love like a disaster you need to prepare for." Jimin stood, turning toward the room with his name on it. The door remained open, sunlight long gone, replaced by the dim gray of evening. He walked inside, trailing his fingers along the bookshelf, the rug, the uneven stitches of the blanket. "You remembered everything," he said. Jungkook appeared in the doorway, hesitant. "I remember what matters." Jimin turned to him. "Then remember this too. I don't need a perfect future, I need the truth." Jungkook nodded slowly, as if each movement required permission from the parts of him still ruled by fear. "The project starts in 3 weeks," he said. 6 months in New York, maybe longer if it succeeds." Jimin absorbed the words, feeling their weight settle into his bones. "And you want to go?" "Yes," Jungkook said, voice barely audible. "And no, both feel true." Taehyung hovered in the hallway, listening without interrupting. Jimin crossed his arms, not defensively, but to hold himself together. "Then here's my truth," he said. "I'm terrified of being left behind, not because I think you'll forget me, but because I know I'll keep choosing you even when you're not here to choose me back." Jungkook's breath hitched. "And that scares me," Jimin continued, "because loving you has never been half measures for me." The confession hung between them, raw and irreversible. Taehyung exhaled slowly, rubbing the back of his neck. "You two are unbelievable," he murmured. "Do you realize most people spend years trying to say what you're saying in one night?" Jimin almost smiled. "Most people don't build secret houses." Jungkook let out a soft, broken laugh. Silence settled again, but this time it wasn't suffocating. It was fragile, like the pause after a storm when the world waits to see what remains standing. "Come with me," Jungkook said suddenly. Jimin blinked. "To New York." Jungkook nodded, the words tumbling out as if he'd been holding them back for weeks. "Not as an escape, not as an obligation, as a choice. We figure it out there, or we figure out we can't, but we stop pretending distance will decide for us." Taehyung's eyebrows shot up. "Well, that's new." Jimin's heart pounded. The idea was reckless, terrifying, and strangely right. "You're asking me to leave everything behind on a maybe." "I'm asking you to build something with me," Jungkook said. "Not here, not there, with me." The room seemed to tilt, the future suddenly wide and uncertain. Jimin looked at the window, at the rain easing into a mist, at the faint outline of trees beyond the glass. He thought of routine, familiarity, the comfort of known streets, and of the ache he felt whenever Jungkook pulled away, whenever fear dictated their choices. "Say it clearly," Jimin said. "No hiding behind metaphors." Jungkook met his gaze, steady despite the tears clinging to his lashes. "I love you," he said. "And I don't want a life that doesn't have you in it, even if that life is easier." The words landed like a heartbeat. Taehyung looked down, giving them the privacy of his silence. Jimin's vision blurred again, but he didn't look away. "You're infuriating," he whispered. "You wait until everything is about to break to tell me the truth." "I'm telling you now," Jungkook said. Jimin let out a shaky breath. "I hate you for making this so hard." "I know. I hate that I want to say yes." Jungkook's lips parted, hope flickering across his face like fragile light. Jimin closed the distance between them, pressing his forehead against Jungkook's. "And I hate that loving you has never been a question." Jungkook's hands rose hesitantly, settling at Jimin's waist, as if anchoring himself to something real. Behind them, Taehyung quietly picked up his soaked coat. "I'll fix the door on my way out," he muttered. "Try not to destroy the rest of the house before you decide your future." Neither of them answered. They were too busy standing in the narrow room, breathing the same air, feeling the weight of everything they could lose and everything they might still choose to keep. The front door clicked shut behind Taehyung with a finality that seemed to echo through the bones of the house. For the first time since he had forced his way in, there was no third presence absorbing the shockwaves of their words. Only Jungkook and Jimin remained, standing inches apart in the small room that bore Jimin's name, the air thick with everything that had finally been said and everything that still hadn't. Outside, the rain had softened to a whisper, but inside, Jimin's pulse thundered in his ears. "You don't get to look relieved," Jimin said suddenly, pulling back just enough to search Jungkook's face. "We are not done." Jungkook swallowed. "I know. You dropped a confession like a lifeline and expect me to just grab it?" Jimin's voice sharpened. "You built a house in secret. You planned to leave. You let me walk into a room with my name on it like I was already a memory." Jungkook's jaw tightened. "It was never meant to be a goodbye." "It felt like one," Jimin shot back. "Do you know what it's like to see your name carved into wood and realize someone you love has been preparing to lose you?" The words hit harder than shouting. Jungkook flinched as if struck. "I wasn't preparing to lose you," he said. "I was preparing for the possibility that you'd realize you deserved someone who doesn't disappear into work and silence." Jimin laughed bitterly. "You don't get to martyr yourself in a story I didn't agree to." Silence followed, taut and electric. Jungkook dragged a hand through his hair, packing once across the room before stopping at the window. "You think I wanted to be the man who leaves?" he asked quietly. "You think I wanted to look at you and choose a plane ticket?" "Then why did you?" Jimin demanded. "Because staying felt like asking you to shrink your world to fit mine," Jungkook said, turning back. "Because loving you makes me want to give you everything, even if that means stepping out of the way." "That's not love," Jimin said fiercely. "That's fear disguised as generosity." Jungkook opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. Jimin's voice softened, but the intensity remained. "Love is letting me decide if I want to stay when things are inconvenient. Love is trusting me with the truth, even if it's messy." The room seemed to hold its breath. Jungkook's shoulders sagged. "I don't know how to do that without feeling like I'm risking everything." "You are risking everything," Jimin said. "So am I, that's what makes it real." The admission hung between them, fragile and terrifying. Jungkook leaned back against the wall, eyes closing briefly. "When I signed the contract," he said, "I told myself it was just 6 months, 6 months of distance, 6 months to prove I could stand on my own. But every night after, I imagined you here, sitting in that chair, reading, waiting for me to come home to a place I wasn't in." Jimin's chest tightened. "So you built a version of me that wouldn't ask questions." Jungkook's eyes opened. "I built a version of home I was afraid to lose." Jimin turned away, pressing his palm against the cool window glass. The faint reflection staring back at him looked older, more tired than he felt inside. "You think I'm strong," Jimin said quietly, "but I'm not strong when it comes to you. I pretend I don't need reassurance. I joke when I'm scared. I leave conversations unfinished because I'm terrified of hearing answers I don't want. Jungkook stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. Why didn't you tell me? Because you already carry so much, Jimin said. I didn't want to be another weight on your shoulders. Jungkook's expression crumpled. You were never a weight. You were the reason I kept standing. The honesty in his voice made Jimin's throat ache. You don't get to decide that alone, Jimin said, turning back to him. You don't get to protect me by shutting me out. Jungkook nodded slowly, the motion heavy with acceptance. Then don't let me. The words settled into the room like a challenge. Jimin studied him, the stubborn tilt of his chin, the vulnerability he tried to hide behind determination. You're asking me to go with you, he said, to leave everything familiar and step into uncertainty. Yes. And if I say no? Jungkook's breath hitched. Then I go knowing I told you the truth, and I spend every day trying to be someone you'd still choose when I come back. The answer was both hopeful and devastating. Jimin's heart pounded, and if you don't come back? Jungkook didn't answer immediately. The silence stretched, filled with the quiet drip of rain from the eaves. Then this house becomes yours, Jungkook said at last, not as a consolation, as proof that what we had was real. Jimin's eyes burned. You're unbelievable. I know. You plan for every ending, except the one where we stay. Jungkook looked at him, something fierce igniting in his gaze. Then help me plan that one. The words struck deep. Jimin stepped closer until their breaths mingled. If I go with you, he said, voice trembling, it won't be as someone following, it will be as someone choosing. Jungkook nodded. That's all I want. And if we fail, Jimin asked, if distance, pressure, and fear tear us apart? Then we fail honestly, Jungkook said, not because we were too afraid to try. The truth of it settled between them, heavy but grounding. Jimin closed his eyes for a moment, letting the sound of the rain and Jungkook's uneven breathing anchor him. He thought of the years behind them, shared laughter, quiet fights, the unspoken understanding that had always existed beneath their words. He thought of the future, wide and uncertain, terrifying in its openness. When he opened his eyes, his voice was steady. You don't get to leave me behind to protect me, he said. If you go with me standing beside you, not waiting in a room with my name on the door. Jungkook's lips trembled. Are you saying? I'm saying we decide together, Jimin interrupted. No more secrets, no more noble sacrifices that no one asked for. Relief and disbelief flooded Jungkook's face in equal measure. Together, he repeated, as if testing the word. A sudden crash of thunder rolled across the sky, closer this time, as if the storm had circled back. The lights flickered, plunging the room into a brief darkness before returning. Jimin exhaled shakily. We should probably fix the door, he murmured. Your dramatic friend nearly destroyed it. Jungkook let out a soft laugh, the sound fragile but real. He'll never let me live this down. He shouldn't, Jimin said. You've been impossible. And you've been evasive. They stared at each other, the accusation softened by shared understanding. Jimin's voice dropped. Promise me something. Anything. No more building futures alone, Jimin said. If you're afraid, you say it. If you're leaving, you tell me. If you love me, you don't wait until everything is breaking to prove it. Jungkook's eyes shone. I promise. The house creaked softly, settling around them like a witness to the vow. For a moment, the world outside ceased to matter. There was no New York, no contracts, no expectations, only two people standing in a half-finished room, daring to imagine a future that required both of them to be braver than they had ever been. Jimin rested his forehead against Jungkook's once more. We are going to regret parts of this, he whispered. Probably, Jungkook admitted. We are going to fight. Definitely. We might even break. Jungkook's arms tightened around him. Then we learn how to rebuild. The rain began to fall harder again, but this time it sounded less like a storm and more like a rhythm, steady, relentless, alive. And in the small house that had once been a secret, two hearts finally chose the same uncertain path. Morning arrived without sunlight. A pale grey sky pressed low over the small house, turning every window into a sheet of dull metal. The storm had passed, but its aftermath clung to the air, the smell of wet earth, swollen wood, and something unsettled that lingered beneath the surface. Jimin woke first, curled on the narrow couch in the living room. His neck ached, and his fingers were still loosely tangled in the edge of the blanket Jungkook had knitted. For a moment, he didn't remember where he was. Then he saw the half-packed toolboxes near the wall, the unfamiliar ceiling, the front door with its hastily reattached hinges. The house. The confession. New York. His chest tightened. From the kitchen came the soft clatter of ceramic. Jimin sat up slowly, his muscles protesting, and followed the sound. Jungkook stood at the counter, sleeves pushed up, carefully pouring coffee into two mismatched mugs. He looked like he hadn't slept, dark circles under his eyes, hair still damp from an early shower, movements too precise, as if he feared that one wrong gesture might shatter the fragile calm they'd reached. "You're awake," Jungkook said without turning. Jimin leaned against the doorway. "You're making coffee in a house that barely has a working sink." Jungkook huffed softly. The essentials were installed first. "Coffee is essential," Jimin agreed, though his voice lacked its usual lightness. Jungkook handed him a mug. Their fingers brushed, lingering for half a second longer than necessary. The silence that followed wasn't hostile, but it wasn't easy either. It was the quiet of two people standing at the edge of a decision that would alter everything. Jimin took a sip. The coffee was too strong, slightly bitter. "You always overbrew when you're anxious." Jungkook's lips twitched. "You always notice." Another silence. Jimin set the mug down on the counter. "When's the flight?" Jungkook froze. "You said 3 weeks," Jimin continued, "but when exactly were you planning to leave?" Jungkook stared at the steam rising from his cup. 17 days. The number landed like a stone in water, ripples spreading through Jimin's chest. 17, he repeated. "You were counting." "I stopped counting," Jungkook said. "Then I started again when you walked into that room." Jimin looked away, jaw tightening. "You're good at building things, not so good at living in them." Jungkook didn't argue. The refrigerator hummed, a new appliance in an otherwise unfinished kitchen. The sound filled the space where words faltered. "Are you really serious about me coming with you?" Jimin asked finally. Jungkook looked up, eyes sharp despite the exhaustion. "I wouldn't have said it if I didn't mean it." "And what does that look like?" Jimin pressed. "You working 18-hour days while I wander a city I don't belong to, waiting in another room with my name on it." Jungkook flinched. "That's not what I want." "Then what do you want?" Jimin's voice rose, frustration breaking through the fragile calm. "Say it without turning it into a dream. Say it like it's real." Jungkook set his mug down with a soft but deliberate clink. "I want to come home to you," he said. "Even if that home is temporary, even if it's messy, I want you there when I fail. I want you there when I succeed. I want to stop building versions of us that only exist in my head." The rawness in his voice made Jimin's chest ache. "And if I hate it there," Jimin asked, "if I feel lost?" "Then we figure out whether the place is wrong or we are," Jungkook said, "and we don't pretend the answer doesn't matter." Jimin ran a hand through his hair, packing the narrow kitchen. "You make it sound simple." "It's not," Jungkook said. "It's terrifying." A sharp knock echoed from the front door. Both of them froze. The sound was deliberate, controlled, not the chaotic pounding from the night before. Jungkook frowned. "Were you expecting anyone?" Jimin shook his head slowly. "No." The knock came again. Jungkook moved toward the door, every step cautious. Jimin followed, his pulse quickening with an inexplicable sense of dread. When Jungkook opened it, cold morning air spilled into the house, and behind it stood a woman in a tailored grey coat, her posture rigid, her expression unreadable. Jungkook's breath left him in a whisper, "Mother." Jimin's heart dropped. The woman's gaze swept past Jungkook into the house, taking in the unfinished walls, the scattered tools, the damp floorboards. Her eyes lingered on Jimin for a fraction too long, measuring, assessing, disapproving. "So this is where you've been hiding," she said coolly. Jungkook stepped outside, instinctively blocking the doorway. "How did you find this place?" "I have always known more about your life than you realize," she replied. "You forget who taught you to plan." Jimin remained just inside, his grip tightening on the edge of the doorframe. He had heard stories, fragments of a childhood built on silence and expectation. Seeing the source of that silence standing on the threshold made those stories suddenly, painfully real. "You didn't answer my calls," she continued. "You ignored your father's messages. And now I hear from your agency that you signed an international contract without consulting your family." "It's my career," Jungkook said, voice tight. "It is our name," she corrected. Her gaze flicked again to Jimin. "And who is this?" Jungkook hesitated. The pause was brief, but devastating. Jimin felt it like a physical blow. "This is Jimin," Jungkook said finally. "He's important," Jimin finished, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. "I'm important." The woman's lips pressed into a thin line. "I see." The air turned brittle. "You're leaving in 17 days, she said to Jungkook. "You will not sabotage this opportunity with distractions." Jimin's chest burned. "I'm not a distraction." She didn't look at him. "You are an unknown variable." Jungkook's hands curled into fists. "He's not a variable, he's part of my life." "And yet you did not tell us about him," she replied, "or this house, or your intentions." Jimin let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "He didn't tell me either." Jungkook closed his eyes briefly, pain flashing across his face. His mother's gaze sharpened. "You see, even now he creates instability." "That's enough," Jungkook said, his voice low and dangerous. The woman studied him, something like surprise flickering beneath her composure. "You would raise your voice to me over this?" "Over him," Jungkook said. "Yes." Silence fell, thick and electric. Jimin's heart pounded so loudly, he was certain they could hear it. His mother's eyes hardened. "You are making a mistake." "Maybe," Jungkook said, "but it's mine to make." The words seemed to fracture, something invisible between them. She looked at him for a long moment, as if searching for the obedient son she had raised. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, but no less cold. "If you walk this path," she said, "you do so without our support." Jimin felt the weight of that threat settle into his bones. This wasn't just disapproval, it was exile. Jungkook's jaw trembled, but he didn't look away. "Then I walk it." The woman's gaze shifted to Jimin one last time. "Take care," she said. "He has always been prone to choosing burdens he cannot carry." Jimin met her eyes. He doesn't have to carry them alone anymore. Something unreadable passed across her face, disdain, perhaps, or the faintest flicker of doubt. Then she turned and walked away, her footsteps precise against the wet gravel, her figure disappearing into the grey morning without once looking back. The door remained open long after she was gone. Cold air filled the house, wrapping around Jungkook like a consequence made real. Jimin stepped closer. "You just lost your family," he said quietly. Jungkook's voice was barely audible. "I lost them a long time ago, I just stopped pretending." The house creaked, settling under the weight of new truths. Jimin reached for his hand. This time, Jungkook held on like someone who had finally chosen which door to walk through, even if he had no idea what waited on the other side. The gravel outside was still wet when the sound of tires crunching faded into the distance, leaving behind a silence so complete it felt like the world had paused to see what Jungkook would do next. He didn't move. The front door remained open, cold air pouring in, lifting the edges of loose papers and carrying the faint scent of rain-soaked soil into the house. Jimin stood a step behind him, close enough to feel the tension radiating from Jungkook's body, but not close enough to touch without permission. "You should close the door," Jimin said softly. Jungkook didn't respond. His hands hung at his sides, fingers slightly curled, as if he was still holding onto something that had just been taken away. "Jungkook," Jimin tried again, gentler this time. Slowly, Jungkook reached forward and pushed the door shut. The click of the latch echoed through the hallway like a verdict. For a moment, he leaned his forehead against the wood, eyes closed. His shoulders rose and fell with shallow breaths, each one uneven, like he was relearning how to exist in a world that had just shifted beneath his feet. "I thought I was prepared for that," he murmured. Jimin stepped closer. No one is prepared to hear their family choose pride over them. Jungkook let out a hollow laugh. "She didn't choose pride, she chose certainty. I've always been her uncertain son." Jimin's chest tightened. "You chose yourself." "I chose you," Jungkook corrected, turning slightly. His eyes were red but dry. "And I don't know if that makes me brave or selfish." "Maybe both," Jimin said. "Maybe that's what love actually looks like." Jungkook studied him, searching for doubt, for regret. "Do you regret it already?" he asked. The question stung. Jimin crossed his arms, not defensively, but to hold himself steady. "I regret that you had to make that choice alone for so long," he said. "I regret that you thought loving me meant losing everything else." Jungkook's jaw tightened. "You heard her, I might have." "Families don't disappear because of one decision," Jimin said. "They fracture, they threaten, they punish, but they leave cracks for return." Jungkook looked away. "You don't know my family." "You're right," Jimin said quietly, "but I know you, and you don't walk away unless you've been standing outside the door for years." The words settled into the space between them, heavy with recognition. Jungkook sank onto the bench by the door, elbows on his knees, staring at the damp floorboards. "When I was 10, he said, "I told my father I wanted to be a painter. He didn't yell, he didn't forbid it. He just said, 'We don't raise children who gamble with their futures.' And that was the end of the conversation." Jimin listened, his heart aching. "I learned to translate their silence," Jungkook continued. "Disappointment, correction, expectation, love, but only if it fit inside their design." Jimin sat beside him. "And now?" "Now I've torn the blueprint," Jungkook said, "and I don't know if there's anything left underneath." Jimin reached out, hesitated, then placed his hand over Jungkook's. "There's you," he said. "There's what you choose to build when no one else is holding the ruler." Jungkook's fingers tightened around his, grounding himself. The house creaked softly, as if adjusting to its new reality. 17 days, Jimin thought. 17 days, until everything changed. "Your mother was wrong about one thing," Jimin said. Jungkook glanced at him. "Only one." Jimin almost smiled. "I'm not a variable, I'm a constant. I've been here through your worst nights, your impossible schedules, your self-doubt that shows up at 3 a.m. like it owns the place." Jungkook's lips trembled. "I know. And I'm still here," Jimin continued. "Even now, even when this is messy and terrifying and unfair." Jungkook's voice dropped. "You should have an easier love." Jimin turned to him fully. "Stop deciding what I deserve. It's insulting." The bluntness startled a quiet laugh out of Jungkook, the first real one since morning. But the moment didn't last. A phone vibrated on the counter. Both of them looked up. Jungkook's expression darkened. "It's my manager." Jimin felt a new tension coil in his chest. "You should answer." Jungkook hesitated. The phone continued to buzz, relentless. "Answer it," Jimin repeated. "We're not hiding anymore, remember." Jungkook stood, each step toward the counter heavy with reluctance. He picked up the phone, staring at the screen for a beat too long before swiping to answer. "Hello," he said. Even from across the room, Jimin could hear the faint, rapid voice on the other end, sharp, urgent, and unmistakably angry. Jungkook's posture stiffened. What do you mean, leaked? Jimin's stomach dropped. No, Jungkook said, voice tightening. No one was supposed to know yet. He paced once, running a hand through his hair. It's a private decision. The contract isn't finalized publicly. A pause. The voice on the other end grew louder, tinny with outrage. Jungkook closed his eyes. I understand the implications. Jimin's pulse pounded. What happened? He mouthed. Jungkook didn't answer. Yes, Jungkook said into the phone, his voice now dangerously calm. I'll handle it. He ended the call and stood there, motionless. What leaked? Jimin asked, dread pooling in his chest. Jungkook looked at him, something like disbelief and anger warring in his eyes. The contract, the relocation, the timeline, it's all over the media. The words landed like a physical blow. Jimin's throat went dry. 17 days just became public. And so did the fact that I've been hiding, Jungkook said. They're calling it betrayal, speculating about internal conflicts, about why I bought property here if I'm leaving. Jimin's heart hammered. They know about the house. They know enough, Jungkook said. Photos, documents, someone dug. The house suddenly felt exposed, its walls no longer a refuge but evidence. And me, Jimin asked quietly, do they know about me? Jungkook didn't answer immediately. That was answer enough. Jimin let out a shaky breath. So now I'm not a variable, I'm a headline. I'm sorry, Jungkook said, voice breaking. I wanted to protect you from this. Jimin laughed softly, the sound brittle. You built a house with my name on the door. Protection was never really your strategy. Jungkook stepped toward him. We can deny it. We can say you're just a friend. The words hung in the air like a test. Jimin stared at him, something inside his chest splintering. Just a friend. I'm trying to shield you, Jungkook insisted. The scrutiny, the speculation, it will tear you apart. And what will pretending I don't matter do? Jimin asked, voice trembling. You think being erased hurts less than being seen? Jungkook froze. Jimin's eyes burned. You asked me to stand beside you. Was that only true in private? No, Jungkook said quickly. No, I don't want them to turn you into something cruel. They will, Jimin said. Whether I'm hidden or not, that's the price of being part of your world. The truth of it settled heavily between them. Jungkook's hands shook. I never wanted you to pay that price. I decide what I'm willing to pay, Jimin said. Not your mother, not your agency, not strangers with headlines. The house seemed to hold its breath again, the walls bearing witness to yet another line being drawn. Jungkook looked at him as if seeing him for the first time, not as someone to protect, but as someone choosing to stay despite the cost. You're sure, he whispered. Jimin's answer came without hesitation. I'm terrified, he said, but I'm not leaving. The first headline appeared before noon. Jimin saw it reflected in Jungkook's darkened phone screen before he even read the words. The air in the small house had turned heavy again, thick with the knowledge that the world outside had finally caught up to the secret they had tried and failed to keep contained. Jungkook didn't unlock the phone right away. He sat at the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, staring at his own faint reflection as if bracing himself for impact. Read it, Jimin said quietly. Jungkook swallowed and tapped the screen. His eyes moved quickly, then stopped. His jaw tightened. He handed the phone to Jimin without a word. Jimin hesitated before taking it. The headline was exactly as cruel as he'd expected, and somehow worse for being so predictable. It spoke of betrayal, speculation, hidden relationships, reckless decisions, and a mysterious figure tied to Jungkook's sudden purchase of a private property just weeks before an international relocation. He didn't need to read further. He placed the phone face down on the table. Well, Jimin said, forcing a breath through lungs that felt too tight, at least they didn't spell my name wrong. Jungkook let out a strangled laugh that broke halfway into something else. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I tried to keep you out of this." "You tried to keep me out of your life," Jimin replied, not unkindly. "This is different." Silence settled between them, but it was no longer the silence of avoidance. It was the silence of two people standing in the open, exposed, but unhidden. Outside, the clouds were beginning to thin. Pale light slipped through the windows, touching the unfinished walls, the scattered tools, the door with Jimin's name carved into it. Jimin followed the light with his eyes, then looked back at Jungkook. "We can't control what they say," he said. "We can only decide whether it's true." Jungkook's hands trembled. "If I confirm anything, it will explode." "And if you deny it?" Jimin asked. Jungkook didn't answer. The absence of an answer was louder than any headline. Jimin nodded slowly. "Exactly." Jungkook looked up, panic flickering in his eyes. "I could lose contracts, endorsements, opportunities I've worked for my entire life." "And if you lie," Jimin said, his voice steady but soft, "you lose something else." The words settled into the space between them like a final piece of a puzzle. Neither of them wanted, but both recognized. Jungkook closed his eyes. "Why does loving you feel like standing at the edge of a cliff?" Jimin's lips curved faintly, though his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Because you've spent your whole life building fences. Now you're somewhere open." A long, fragile pause followed. Jungkook stood and walked toward the door with Jimin's name on it. He ran his fingers over the carved letters, tracing each uneven groove. "I made this room so you'd always have a place here," he said, "even if I was too afraid to ask you to stay." Jimin joined him, close enough that their shoulders brushed. "You don't need a room with my name on it," he said. "You need to say my name when it matters." Jungkook turned to him, eyes searching. "Park Jimin," he said, voice steady despite the tremor in his chest. "Stay." The simplicity of the word broke something open inside Jimin. "I'm here," he answered. No grand declarations, no dramatic gestures, just truth spoken without armor. Jungkook exhaled, the sound shaky but lighter than anything Jimin had heard from him in days. "Then we face it," he said. "The headlines, the questions, my family, the distance, all of it." "Together," Jimin said. They stood in the doorway of the small room, the house quiet around them, the future uncertain and vast. For the first time, the uncertainty didn't feel like a threat. It felt like space, space to build something real, imperfect, and shared. Jungkook picked up his phone again. His thumb hovered over the screen for a long moment before he opened the camera app. He turned it toward them, hesitating. Jimin raised an eyebrow. "You're documenting the moment we ruin your career." Jungkook huffed a quiet laugh. "I'm documenting the moment I stop running." He snapped the photo before he could change his mind. In the image, they stood close but not posed, eyes tired, expressions raw, the unfinished house behind them. No filters, no staging, just truth. Jungkook opened his social media, his pulse hammering. He attached the photo, his fingers trembling over the keyboard. He typed slowly, deliberately, each word a step across a line he could never uncross. No explanations, no denials, no elaborate defense. Just a single sentence. He showed the screen to Jimin before posting. Jimin read it, his throat tightening, then nodded. Jungkook pressed share. The world outside would react. It always did. There would be noise, judgment, support, anger, and endless speculation. But inside the small house, there was only the quiet sound of two people breathing in sync. Jimin slipped his hand into Jungkook's. Jungkook held on. The headlines would fade, contracts would change, families might fracture and mend in unpredictable ways, distance would test them, fear would return in quieter forms. But the house was no longer a secret. And neither were they.